welcome to the Thought Brothers. Hey, it's October 3rd, 2nd, October 2nd. We had a debate last night. Carlos, tell us about the debate. Did you watch that? What's your take?
Well, yeah, I definitely watched it. It was a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be. You got a chance to know both of the vice presidential candidates. Um, got a chance to know who they are, how they feel, where they came from, and how do I say it? It was okay. It wasn't as entertaining as the Harris Trump debate, but a couple things that you hear the responses the next day, and right after the debate and so forth. And let's just say people who watched that debate heard what they wanted to hear, because I saw Governor Walz make a lot of common sense statements. And yes, he did. He did fumble. He admitted he was a knucklehead about over speaking about the China thing from 1989. Okay, all right. I'll give you that, whatever that case may be. But he seemed like he was down to earth and very factual. With the exception of and he acknowledged the his mistake. JD Vance, somehow everyone talks about how calm he was last night, but I sort of saw a guy, for some reason, he reminded me of this one guy, okay, from back in the day. And that one guy from back in the day is when I went into a Ford dealership as a very young man looking to buy a Ford Mustang. And for some reason, after speaking with this guy for 30 minutes and telling him exactly what type of Mustang I wanted, what type of car I wanted, he somehow walked me up to a four-door Ford Escort station wagon. So I'm just trying to say, JD Vance, he sort of says what he wants to say. He sort of, this is my interpretation, and he sort of puts his own spin on it. And he doesn't, as Governor Walz acknowledged his mistake, he didn't acknowledge Donald Trump's mistake of losing the election. So you start to see things like that. And then you see JD Vance referred to Governor Walz as just Tim all night. Like, I didn't know they hung out. Where was the respect factor from Governor, addressing him as Governor Walz? It was just a lot of things I saw that just sort of reminded me of that salesman from way back in the day who was trying to make me take something I really didn't need, but it was going to somehow make his day better if I went in a direction he wanted me to go into instead of the direction I wanted to go into. So that's what I'm getting from JD Vance. To me, Vance never really answered a question. Every time they asked Vance a question, it seemed like he was deflecting the question. And then they had to bring him back a couple times at the end and say, hey, can you just answer this question? And then when he was asked to actually answer the question after rambling for a couple of minutes, the answer always involved blaming Harris, Biden, pretty much for everything. So for me, the debate, I felt like Tim Walz was more of a down-to-earth guy. I thought he was perfect. Obviously, no man is perfect. I'll give him the one misspeak about China, whatever the case may be. And JD Vance, for some reason, and also with JD Vance, I'm gonna call it for that. Was it Mr. Spivey may be able to remember? CJ may not be able to remember, but I think Dan Quayle back in 92 on a vice presidential debate compared himself to Jack Kennedy because he was a young Republican, and the older, more experienced Republican, I forgot what the gentleman's name was, but he said, I knew Jack Kennedy, you're no Jack Kennedy. And when I look at Vance, I look at a guy who I think is barely 40 years old. He may be educated and he may have accomplished some things in his 40 years. But with the problems this country has, I sort of need somebody with more experience to solve these problems. I mean, my high school letterman jacket's older than JD Vance. I mean, I'm just calling it for what I'm calling it for. So, I mean, again, maybe he's the answer, but I just don't think he's Jack Kennedy. And I think Jack Kennedy at 40 could have solved these problems because he seemed like he was once in a lifetime guy. I mean, he passed away or was assassinated before I was even born, but people still talk about him like he was, something special. Now, again, not everybody's going to be Jack Kennedy. I just don't think J.D. Vance is Jack Kennedy. He made a reference to Bobby Kennedy endorsing him, but he's no Jack Kennedy. So I just don't get a good feeling about J.D. Vance. And you got to remember that if Donald Trump is almost 80 years old, and he's elected, you're saying you're voting for the actual people who are going to hold office. I like when Obama went in and said, look, I'm going to elect somebody, pick somebody as my vice president, where if the worst were to happen, he could be president, which was Biden. So Biden eventually became president. So I guess, obviously, that meant Obama made a good choice that he picked somebody who could actually be president. I don't know if we're going to be in great hands if something happens to Trump. Natural causes, whatever the case may be, because he's getting up on 80, and he can say he's in perfect health, but I think he's rocking probably a 46 or 48 waistline. So I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. So I'm putting my money with a guy who's been in Congress. I'm sorry, he's been in the military, whether it was National Guard or not. Been a teacher. Said he used the money from the military for the GI Bill. Became a teacher. He's been a teacher. Been a football coach. Hey, anybody runs a 44 stack defense, I know what that is with my Football Alumni Association experience. I'm down with him. I think he won a state championship. He served in Congress, and he's been a 2-term governor in Minnesota, where they said he had the number one, medical, I guess, coverage in the country. And now he's been chosen to be vice president. And you can't find anything on this guy except for the mistake he made about quoting China from 35 years ago. So, we don't want anything ever to happen to our presidents or the people who become president. But if it does happen, you want to know you're in decent hands with a qualified vice president. Ronald Reagan was smart enough to know, and I'm a Democrat, not a Republican, but him being an actor, and even though he was governor for California for 8 years, his background was in acting. He knew that if something happened to him, which it almost did in 81 with Hinckley, that he needed somebody qualified. Again, I'm not a Republican, but the first George Bush was a World War II vet. He held high-ranking positions, in the CIA?
He was director.
Director of CIA.
He was director of CIA, yeah. He was an ambassador. He was an ambassador.
I was going to say he held like a bunch of other different positions, high-ranking positions in the U.S. government. So when he was picked to become vice president, yes, he picked somebody just like Obama did who could be president if they needed to, and eventually he did become president. So my take on this debate from last night, before I turn it over to the rest of the guys, is that everyone keeps saying it doesn't matter about who the vice president is. I think it matters. And I think Walz's experience is Trump's. I mean, funny to say that, right? Trump's Vance's experience. And you got to think about these things too. It is very possible that, something could happen to Trump, not necessarily an attempt on his life, but just natural causes, because he's not in the best health, no matter what we hear every day. And he is starting to age. You can start to see it based on now and 5 years ago, 10 years ago, et cetera. So that is my take. Again, people who listened to that debate heard what they wanted to hear, but I saw what I saw, and I know which way I'm heading. Again, I always hand the baton to Mr. Spivey before we have CJ bring it home. Mr. Spivey, what you got? What's your thoughts? What's going on?
It's ironic to listen to you talk about Ronald Reagan, who had been an actor, but he had served as the governor of California. And then here you talk about Obama, who became president. But if you remember, Obama hadn't been in the Senate, I think, but maybe 1 year. The difference between those guys and Donald Trump is they knew that they didn't know Washington, D.C. They didn't know the layout of the land. The difference is Donald Trump thinks he's the smartest person in the room. He thinks he's smarter than any doctor, scientist, lawyer, or whoever. And so those people were smart enough to get someone that would stand behind them and give them good counsel. And also, if something happened to them, that they didn't worry about the country. The debate last night, what I saw J.D. Vance, who is a slick talker. He's the guy who knows how to debate. He kind of reminded me a little, but he's not a slick talker, but he reminded me a little of Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom is a professional debater. But on the same hand, from what I saw, J.D. Vance did not answer any questions of substance. And I took notes. Topic of guns, January the 6th, Obamacare, the border, abortion, healthcare. He tap danced around every one of the issues. I mean, he's a little sharper. He's a little more polished than Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump, you ask him about abortion, in some kind of way, he's going to tell you about immigration, and he's going to tell you about people eating dogs and cats. If you ask him about guns, he's going to tell you about some other bullshit. So J.D. Vance was a little smoother. But as I said, he did not answer any of those questions. Tim Walz beat him on all the substantial issues. The one thing that J.D. Vance did last night, which I think he will never be able to live down, J.D. Vance said he never supported a national ban on abortion. And that is a outright lie. You don't have to fact check him or anything, because he's on tape and they have records of him saying he wants abortion to be illegal nationwide. So as far as I'm concerned, Walsh, Carlos, the thing that really troubles me is the things that people hang their hat on today. Walsh got hung up on whether he was in China in March or April. Do you know how long ago Tiananmen Square was? That's when the students were killed. I don't give two shits whether he was there in March or April. But this is what people hang their hat on, is somebody making a mistake on whether he was there in March, April, or June. It's not important to be the vice president of the United States. And then when I heard someone say, well, it's all about character. When you're talking about Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, please don't mention character to me, because there is no character. These are two guys that I have absolutely zero respect for, because they put people's lives in danger and they put kids in danger. And the thing with Springfield, Ohio, which J.D. Vance is his state, and for you to put out some type of lie about people eating dogs and cats, the Proud Boys coming into Ohio, I really have no respect for either one of them. So that was my take on it. The last thing where I think Walsh really slammed J.D. Vance was when Vance, I know he loved to tap dance, he loved to talk slick, but he was unable to say Trump lost the election. And he asked him straight up. And the other thing was, when I couldn't believe he said it, but he said Trump saved Obamacare. Trump tried to get Obamacare repealed 60 times while he was in the presidency during the 4 years. And so I think Walsh slammed him and destroyed him on the health care. And then he said, which I really don't understand how he set his mouth to say it, but he said Trump did a smooth transition on January the 20th. And that was the coup de grace to me of J.D. Vance's debate. Carlos, CJ, it's all yours.
All right. I agree with a lot of the analysis that was already put ahead, but disagree with some. I don't think this debate mattered, and nor do I think these vice presidential candidates matter, honestly, because they were just surrogates for their candidates. I don't think this moved the needle either way. Shockingly, I think J.D. Vance won on the style points, but not the substance, as you guys laid out. There is no substance. He couldn't answer anything, but because they weren't actively fact-checking him, if someone is not into the politics and knows the details, I think J.D. Vance would come across as the winner. If we're talking about substance, I think Walz obviously is better on substance and not just shamelessly lying every question. But Walz didn't have a strong performance either. He seemed very nervous and bumbling, and there are reports that Kamala's team told him to tone down the attacks, like calling them weird and the things that have been effective. And he seemed like he was overly agreeable with JD Vance, as JD Vance lied his way through the whole debate. Walt seemed very, very content to play, patty cakes with him and not really slam him. So I think Walt's had a lot of opportunities to choke slam him through a table, Vince McMahon style, but did not, and chose to politely lay him down on a pillow. And I thought that wasn't a great strategy from Waltz. And again, he also seemed nervous. Maybe that was a part of it too. That might just be part of it. But I don't think he had a strong performance, but I think he has an easier job because he's not defending such insane things. As you said, JD Vance came across as, smooth. He's a very good liar when he can stay on script. But on the substance, as you said, he couldn't even admit that Trump lost the 2020 election. There's no way to weasel your way out of that. They're kind of ridiculous if you can't do that at this point. And as you said, doubling down on the Haitian story, the Haitians eating cats and dogs, which he admitted live on TV that he made up. He just made it up because he couldn't find any examples of anything that racist for him to amplify. So he had to just make up a story. And a lot of people didn't catch this, but he refuses to even acknowledge that those Haitians who are here legally are here legally. He continues to call them illegal, even though they're here under TPA, which is temporary protective status. So TPS. So obscenely racist and ridiculous. But JD Vance was a much smoother operator in terms of if somebody is uninformed and we're just scrolling through the debate, looking who seems more polished, who seemed more prepared. I think Vance seemed more prepared, but he has to answer for an insane person, which is going to have him lose the debate every single time because you have to be a surrogate for Donald Trump. And again, he has to be a bootlicker for Donald Trump. That's the only way you get that job as VP. But I don't think either candidate had a very strong performance, honestly. I thought the first question was actually atrocious as well. To ask both of them how much they supported Israel striking Iran is not a great question to lead the debate on for domestic reasons. But so neither one moved the needle. Neither one had a great performance. I think JD Vance had a somewhat impressive performance because he's been so terrible to this point. Seeing him, not come across as like a creepy weirdo was almost shocking. But again, I think Vance was well prepared going into the debate. I think little things like Carlos mentioned, the way he was referring to Waltz, I think he had some mind games he was trying to play, but overall, I don't think it's going to move the needle in either direction, honestly. I think it was a very boring debate. I wish I would have skipped it and took a nap instead, but we're here. And I don't think this is going to have any effect on the overall election coming up, honestly.
I agree with CJ. I remember before the debate started, Lawrence O'Donnell talked about this debate, and he said, this is just theater for television. He said, that's all it is. And he basically said the same thing CJ said about it wasn't going to change people's opinion. But CJ, at one point, I don't know if you remember, I think it might have been, I can't think of her name now, Laura O'Donnell. She said something, and JD Vance immediately said, you're not supposed to be fact checking. You're violating your own rules.
Well,
And
yeah, she had to fact check him because he was talking about the immigrant story where he was like, he called them illegals, and she was saying that, look, those 20,000 immigrants or whatever, they're here legally under TPS. So and that made him look bad as well. I mean, you're crying about a fact check, like you should probably be lying less.
How about that? Hey, look, you think about this whole thing is everything that Vance said somehow, when he wasn't blaming Harris, or Biden, but pretty much 90% of the blames were on Harris. He was blaming immigration, right?
That's it, yeah.
Basically, what I'm seeing is this. Here's what we're looking at. Like, Mr. Spivey, I think you said it best. I mean, Donald Trump thinks he's the smartest person in the room or in the country, in the world, whatever the case may be. Basically, make a long story short, you have people who simply just don't want the immigrants here, right? And this, everything back to immigrants. They're going to take homes from Americans. Here's the deal. My biggest concern about the whole immigrant thing is this. We did not kick European immigrants out of the country. We're not running through New York City or Chicago looking for little Italy or little Germany or little Greek town. No, we're basically focused on the Mexican border. Okay. Nobody's focused on the Canadian border. I think Justin Bieber has come over here and wrecked some stuff, but nobody seems to care about that. So I'm just saying, you can't like just pick a particular race of people or a particular ethnicity or a particular geographic area and just go at it. If you say anything about Ireland to an Irish person, Fighting Irish will come out. If you say anything to anyone about Italians, the Italians will probably try to fight you. The little old lady with the broom will try to fight you. I mean, but why are we just? I mean, I understand they say all these bad things happen from Mexico, and man, it's just you can't have your cake and eat it too. Is basically what I'm trying to say. Is you want the world to be exactly the way you want it to be. Change will happen in this world no matter what we do. We cannot stop change. If we all could live to be 200 years old, you think we've seen some change in 25 years, 50 years, or maybe almost 75 years? Oh, what are we going to see in 200 years? Oh my gosh, maybe there will be no more white or black races in 200 years. Maybe we'll all just be a little bit of each other. So you never know what's going to happen. So I just think that trying to fight natural change in the geography or the citizenship of this country, it's just it's a losing battle. You can say what you want. If it was a winning battle, again, the Native Americans would still be owning this country. Okay, I mean they would still be. It's not going to happen. So I think the 4 years that Trump is proposing, and whoever they're going to try to run from the Republican side after that, I just think they're wasting their time. I really do. And people can be like, "Oh, what do you mean he's wasting his time?" Bottom line is, people who want to vote for Trump are voting for him for monetary reasons. Let me tell you something. They would let everybody from every country all over the world come in if they all could get rich off of them. Okay, but the problem is, they're not getting rich off of them, so we don't want you in here. But if you're a billionaire from Russia or a billionaire from Australia and you want to come over here and start a company and do some things, you're welcome, because we're going to make some money off you. But if you can't make any money off the Mexicans coming across the border, that's going to be a problem. So we can't have you here in this country. So it's a lot of different things. The bottom line is people vote for who they vote for because it's going to favor them. And with the way the economy's going, and I've been to all 50 states, okay, most of our immigrants are going to major cities, okay? There aren't too many immigrants in the middle of Iowa, Montana, what other state I've been to, even Minnesota or Green Bay, Wisconsin. I mean, it's not too many immigrants that you'll see people of different ethnicities no matter where you go. But I'm just telling you, don't let it be a culture shock when you leave DC, Baltimore, New York, Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, and you leave those major cities and you go to other cities and you see that pretty much it's still 60%, probably 70% white, probably 20% black, and probably 10% other. So 90% of most of this country is still white and black. But in the major cities, no, that's a big difference. It might be 50-50, 50% white, 30% black, and now 20%, well, I'll take that back. It's probably 40% white, probably 20 to 25% black. And then you just factor in another 35%. Latinos are probably at least 20, 25%. And another 5 or 10% you're probably factoring in is other ethnicities. So I just think that the Republicans, the worst thing that can happen is obviously they win. And if they win, look, I've heard so much about immigration. I don't even know what good policies they actually have. They can't solve healthcare. They can't solve immigration because, again, more people were deported under Obama than they were under Trump. I'm trying to figure out what will happen is, obviously, if you make more money, if you're a richer person in this country, they're going to get you some tax breaks and you're going to save money. And that's why you're voting for them. You believe they're going to deport more people. But if Obama deported more people than Trump did, they're probably not going to deport more people. They're probably saying the things you would like, that some people would like to hear, so we can get your vote. So I just think the whole thing's a big mess. And I think in reality, I hope Harris can pull it out. But we'll see. I mean, either way, I'm going to make it work with whoever's in the White House. I'm just hoping it's somebody in the White House is more liberal. I'm sorry. I guess you could say I guess the word is liberal. Is more for everyone's point of view, not just a particular point of view. And the Republicans seem to be on this particular point of view. We're going to do it my way or no way. You know, there are no options. You're going to do it my way, okay, when it comes to abortion. You're going to do it my way when it comes to immigration. You're going to do it. There's no options. There's no alternate highways for anybody. And I think that's what really scares some people who aren't rich. I'll be quiet now because I know I went on a little bit of a tangent on that, but I think we almost need it as we're less than a month away from the election. That's my
Well,
thought as a thought, brother. Bam.
I'm telling you, I think we gave too much time to the vice presidential election. just
You
my
know,
thought.
Carlos, one of the things that you say is the Republicans say you're going to do it my way. The problem with that is they have no way. They have no health
No
care.
ideas. Yeah, they're
They
not there
don't
to
have
govern.
anything. The only thing they want to do is destroy democracy and just wreck this country for themselves. And so, you know, when they say you're going to do it my way, and you say, well, okay, you're going to get rid of Obamacare. What is your health care plan? We're working on it. You're 30 some days from the election and you're still working on a health care plan. So, you know, but I do want to say, I laugh every time I think about it, but I remember when Trump was dogging Biden about being the old man. And now, who's the old man? It's his racist, misogynistic ass.
All right, CJ, final thought before we get out of here.
The biggest swing factor in the election probably going forward is going to be whether we end up in a war with Iran before the election, which Israel is trying to get popped off, which is going to be a direct consequence of Biden unable to rein in Israel, which is a problem. So again, that's probably the most likely thing to get you Donald Trump, is to be Joe Biden leading us into World War III right before the election, because he can't tell his buddy Netanyahu to stop doing a genocide. So that's probably the biggest worry factor, not just for the World War III factor, but it also will affect the election, because Netanyahu openly wants Trump to win. And a good way to, you know, stick it to the Biden administration is to start a war in the Middle East right before the election, which would not bode well for Mr. Biden, as many people for the past 8 or 10 months or so have been begging him to, you know, try to rein in Israel, which is basically a proxy of the United States, who is now, you know, belligerently destabilizing the Middle East because they refuse to stop ethnically cleansing civilian populations. They're also bombing Lebanon too, which is civilian population in Lebanon, blowing up apartment buildings with the same script saying that there are weapons and missiles under your home somehow. So evacuate to a safe area, but we can't tell you which area is safe. But just, you need you to leave your homes because we're going to blow them up, is what they've told the people of Lebanon. So that would be something to keep an eye on leading into November. But beyond that, the election continues to be close. Kamala Harris, I think, is maybe a slight favorite. Trump is still running an atrocious campaign, but at the same time, Kamala is not offering a lot. She's kind of playing defense, which I think is a mistake at this point. So close to the election, I think you really need to be aggressive in making your point to the American people and not ducking as many interviews as possible and trying to run out the clock and, you know, make it a close election, because it's going to be a mess regardless of who wins the election anyway. The American people really deserve ranked choice voting and an opportunity for a viable party outside of the two parties that are corporate controlled by the same interests.
CJ, I agree with you 100%. And, you know, this election has really gotten to the point that it's becoming sickening. Donald Trump the other day made a statement during one of his speeches, and he talked about Harris as being guided by a demonic force and is using witchcraft. But the one that really got to me the other day was Donald Trump during a speech said Joe Biden became mentally impaired while he was in office, and Kamala Harris was born that way. I really and truly think, and I know it's going to sound like weak, but she should pull a Eugene Carroll. She should have a lawyer file suit against his ass for slander and make him prove it.
Well,
mean,
when you think about this whole thing, we got a convicted felon who has had sexual assault charges against him, and he's allowed to run for president even while his sentencing is upcoming. And that's how a particular rich man of one particular race in this country is treated. Then there's another rich man of another particular race in this country. He's not convicted. He's not a convicted felon yet. But as one of my favorite comedians says, it doesn't look good, because there was Mr. Sean Diddy Combs hit with a wave of 120 new sexual assault allegations today. So when we look at all these things that are happening in the country, I guess what it comes down to, how about we end the show on something that we learned maybe in school, maybe in church, maybe from our families. The truth shall set you free.
All right.
And that's my final thought as a
And
thought.
on that note, we are the Thought Brothers. And until next week, we're out of here.
Be careful, people.
Good night, everybody. Good night.